In contrast, Kelly's western routes take 2 to 3 days longer, and they're filled with hardships, like the rocks beneath your sleeping bag, the bitter winds of the Shira Plateau, and the 600-foot Barranco Wall. But if you're willing to meet these challenges, your chances of reaching the summit are doubled. Whether you're climbing mountains or writing books, success is never certain no matter which route you take. But I firmly believe our odds are better when we take the tougher trail. I'd like to put forward 3 challenges to the writers and aspiring writers in the room, not as a roadmap to success, but as a framework for thinking about which books will represent our generation, regardless of who publishes them or in what format they're delivered. Readers, I'm not leaving you out, not by a long shot. It's ultimately up to you to determine how well we meet these challenges, and I hope you will hold us, all of us, to a very high standard. First, I think we must continually raise the bar on the technical quality of our writing. In preparation for today's remarks, I began following a number of blogs and lists in order to learn what issues were important to those who make up the lesbian book community. I've seen a position put forth, not only by readers, but by reviewers and authors as well, that as long as the story is interesting, things like typos and grammatical errors are no big deal. I ask you, have we grown so used to poor writing that we're now willing to overlook it? I hope not. We expect umpires to know the rules of the game. We expect architects to understand structural engineering and bank tellers to grasp basic mathematics. Shouldn't readers expect us to master the fundamentals of our craft? As for the stories, well, we aren't just writing stories. We're writing books. Books that will be around forever, warts and all. We mustn't squander our gifts of creativity with poor execution, especially when we have the chance to write a generational book. The second challenge is to go beyond the basics of spelling, grammar, and verb tense to really embrace the editing process. Think of it as our program for continuing education. Are you the sort of student that seeks easy instructors who will ask little of you and still give you a good grade? Or do you seek tough taskmasters who will challenge you to work hard in order to be better? Editing is more than striking extra commas and pointing out where someone shuddered when they should have shuddered. A good editor strips cliches and hyperbole from your narrative, points out when your characters are acting out of character, complains about your plot lags, tangents, and loose ends, and tells you when your horse died of boredom. Photographs of Claudia was my 13th book, so one might think I should be an old pro at writing by now. But I really struggled with it, so much that when I turned it in, I told my editor, who happened to be Catherine Forrest, that I wasn't very happy with what I'd written, but I just couldn't seem to fix it. Each time I hear back from Catherine on a new submission, her notes always begin with something positive and upbeat. I know she does that intentionally in order to cushion the criticisms that will follow. This time was no different. She said, "You have such good instincts." I wasn't happy with it either. She went on to say she really liked the opening line, but as far as she was concerned, I could lose the rest. And this was my 13th book. My problems weren't punctuation errors, misplaced dialogue tags, or slippages in point of view. They were deep structural flaws that required a reconceptualization of the presentation and a massive rewrite. But in the end, I produced a book I was proud of, and yes, just for Catherine, I kept the opening line. Books, classes, writer workshops, and writer groups, workshops like the ones we have here at GCLS, will help you hone your craft, but nothing is as personal or relevant as the feedback you get from a good editor. Every mark on the page is an opportunity not just to fix something, but to learn it. Over time, that sea of red that once bathed your work will become just the occasional bloody wound. Then you can pat yourself on the back for finally mastering the art of writing. Or you can decide you're ready for the demands of a new editor who can teach you even more. I'm almost finished. I have to pee too. The last challenge, we mustn't shy away from taking our readers on difficult journeys. Collectively, we seem to write a lot of books on the Miranda route. The plots are relatively straightforward and predictable. The characters are beautiful and they excel at what they do. Their flaws are minor, and their conflicts are easily resolved. Yes, these stories can be very pleasing to the genre reader, and when they're well written, they can also be successful, winning awards, selling well, and generating lots of positive reviews from readers who feel satisfied when they reach the end of the book. It's very, very tempting as a writer to want those rewards every single time. And there is certainly a place for books like that, a rather large place in case you haven't noticed. After all, popular means people read them. And we should be proud of how well we fulfill that need. That said, I have a feeling the books for our generation will come from writers who took one of the more challenging, less traveled routes. What kinds of books am I talking about? Perhaps it is those which bring out more of the unheard voices. Bisexuals, transgender, people of color, people with disabilities, people of different ages and body types. Or we can incorporate more demanding subject matters into our stories, themes that will help our readers navigate the problems they increasingly face in their lives. Things like grief, illness, addiction, crisis of faith, job loss, sexual dysfunction, depression, and aging. These issues are universal, but as lesbians, we experience them uniquely, and often without family support or society's safety nets. And we face them with anxiety, grace, melodrama, and humor. Readers love these tough stories and will shower you with praise and sterling reviews. Actually, that isn't true. And therein lies one of the reasons we find it so difficult to give up the comforts of the Miranda route. Chances are you'll take a public beating for any story that pushes readers out of their comfort zone, no matter how well you write it, or how happily it ends. You'll hear that real life is tough enough, that books are meant to be an escape. They'll say they don't like stories about fill in the blank. The list is endless. So yes, it's very tempting to play it safe. But something marvelous can happen when you choose the more difficult trail. It may come in the form of an email from an address you don't recognize, a woman you don't know. With great respect, she'll begin, "Dear Miss Spangler, Miss Painter, Ms. Beers, Ms. Ames, Ms. Badger. And she'll apologize for the intrusion on your time. She's never written a letter like this before, but felt compelled to tell you what your book meant to her. For the first time, she saw herself in a book, someone who felt trapped and hopeless, with special burdens she thought no one else shared. Your book showed her she wasn't alone, and thanks to the brave words you wrote, she now has hope. And perhaps 20 very short years from now, she'll stand at one of your readings and tell you your book saved her life. I'd like to close with an erratum. I'd like to close with an erratum to correct a mistake I made during a presentation in Phoenix back in 2008. I'd done a good bit of research on how to build an author website that readers would find entertaining and useful, an engaging platform to effectively promote your books. I advised those creating blogs to stick to topics that had to do with writing. Readers don't look up your website because they care about what you think or feel, I said. They want to know when your next book is coming out, what it's about, and why you wrote it. Part of my reasoning was that readers ought to find a professional, not a personality, at the other end of the book they've just read. But in truth, I think it had more to do with being that military brat who thought keeping her emotional distance was a good thing. I couldn't have been more wrong. With the personal struggles I've had over the last couple of years, there were lots of days I didn't even want to get out of bed. I knew I needed to step away from writing for a while and tend to both my physical and mental health, and I began sprinkling my blog posts with more personal updates, mostly to explain why I was canceling events and dropping off the book grid. The response to what I posted was overwhelmingly kind and compassionate. Hardly a day went by without a note from someone sharing empathy, sympathy, advice, support, well wishes, or just asking how I was doing. It was the most amazing feeling to realize I had so many friends on my side. Not readers, friends. And it's a very glorious feeling to know that I write for people like that. Thank you.